Do you often struggle with getting less than ideal drum rooms to sound awesome in a mix? In this clip, Sam goes over how he took the modest drum room sounds used on the latest intervals release, and with the combination of dynamic processing and reverb, was able to generate a massive drum sound for the record. Enjoy.
Oh, the room. It's so funny. You would not know that the room was so small when you drop in that mono room, but it's just because that it's done in like a corridor, that mono room. Definitely very exciting sounding on its own. Tons of low end, tons of excitingness, but we come back to what I was saying where I need the low end more focused in a song like this or on a record like this. So I'm getting rid of a lot of that low end. I've got a bit of dynamic EQing going on the top end here just because it's a room mic. You know, you don't need this like sizzly business happening. You know, I don't want to get rid of all of it. I want the worst of it to be kind of tame. All right, what did I do with Soothe? Oh, nice. Honestly, it sounds so easy. Soothe is a plugin. It's a really aggressive, really well-designed plugin. I'm not a fan of presets and plugins, but the guys who made this plugin knew what they were doing. So I started with Drum Room Harsh, and I probably just tweaked it a little bit. And honestly, it does what it says it does. If you have a harsh drum room, it's getting rid of exactly what I wanted to get rid of with almost no effort. And it's, again, a negligible thing. I bypass that, and in the moment, you can hear the difference, but you can't really. It's doing like exactly what it has to do, and that's its job. Like Soothe is one of those plugins that I'll use it 1 or 2 times in a session, if at all. It is very one-trick pony, but it exists for that one trick, and you pay a premium for that one trick, and they know how to do it, and they program presets that are sick at it, and they give you you're buying, when you buy Soothe, you're buying the ability to do something that nothing else does for exactly when you need to do it, and that is invaluable in some plugins. So, as always, I sort of make my overheads and my mono play with each other nicely because, you know, they're very important. I'll kill a drum comp. So yesterday I talked about this a little bit. I usually send just my overheads to my drum reverb. This is the same drum reverb as yesterday. My Drum Room 2020. Compression, a little bit of different EQ, just because, like, you know, slicker drums, you always want to kind of get rid of that spot in drums. It builds up real fast. So I talked about it a little bit yesterday. My bad. There we go. I guess I wasn't getting enough just out of the overheads being sent here. I'll kill this here. Especially because I didn't have big stereo rooms I liked. I didn't like the stereo rooms there. Even though I've got my stereo room samples, those sound like a room, whereas there's still a reverby vibe to my drum verb. How do I do this quick? Just do a trim on here. If you open so I don't forget about you. So I sent it. And my first instinct was probably, I'm not getting enough out of this, like my fake drum room setup with this reverb that I want. It's at this point when I'm listening where I'm like, okay, I nerfed a lot of the kick out of the overheads. Maybe I want a bit of kick in this room. So I, you know, fed pre-fader. And I don't know if you can tell just sort of listening there. That's off. And that's on. It's basically bringing the kick back that I took out of the overheads, but with the real kick drum. And that's the goal with this drum reverb, is to get this balance. So, you know, I start with the kick. I liked the smack of the snare, but I guess I wanted a little bit more, especially because I didn't use samples in this. It was really easy to kind of send the real ones without it sounding weird and conflicty in the drum verb. That already. Without it. With it. You know, you're starting to build the room there. And then I probably sent the toms. Oh, just straight up 0, just like the snare. Let's find a Tommy part in the song. Without, you know, I mean, now that I'm sending a little bit of kick and a little bit of snare, it would be weird if I didn't send the tom. So I think what my goal was doing this was to try to build this, you know, extra room here. And as always, at this point, I'm checking that room with my fake rooms. Okay, I'll turn on what I'm doing here. We'll talk about the fake rooms, and I'll come back to the room reverb. So fake rooms, I did GGD on this one instead of the slate rooms, and I like to sound them a little bit more for a mix like this. So here they are on their own. So quiet. Definitely a little longer than I'd like. Not a bad thing. I think I just really like the tone of the room, and that's why I went with it. And how I solved that, it being a little longer, is a transient plugin and just pulling back that sustain a little bit. So listen to the tails, especially kick and snare tails, without the transient designer. And you bring this in. It's got all the vibe of the room, and I'm not doing much. I'm only doing a little bit. I mean, I guess minus 20%. But I'm just doing what I'm doing there is killing a bit of that sustain. I don't want the room to ring as long, but I love the tone of the room. I probably did this in context. Like I probably was listening to the whole mix, and this was a bit of a late in the game drum move. Just like, hey, I'm realizing these tails and soft parts are going a little long or whatever. How do I deal with that? And that was how I dealt with it. Slammed it with a bit of compression. By a bit, I mean a lot. Goal with this was to get the snare sort of slamming. So I've got a roll off happening sidechain at 70 hertz here to sort of avoid the kick drum and the buildup in the toms. And then an EQ just cleaning up the problems. Funny thing about a Rouser or VCA plugins is sometimes they get a little, not distorty, but they get kind of like thuddy in their compression. So it's something I'm cleaning up afterwards. You hear like on the snare, kind of. And I'm just going in and taking care of it. You know, I definitely don't need too much of the low end. I just need more of the actual vibe of a room. Getting rid of the sort of like build up spots. Boosting a bit of the sizzle from the drums, like in the room. And just, this is almost safety netting the top end of it, just to like getting rid of a little bit. You can barely hear it. I'm curious as to why I even did that. Probably just out of instinct. I checked this with the drum room. And to me, that's a little loud right now. I was wondering why that was so loud, my trim. To me, that like rivals a drum room, you know, like especially, you know, it wasn't recorded in a big room and it now sounds like it is. You bring in that mono mic too at some point. That could be any big studio at the end of the day. It does not sound like it's done in a basement, you know? And that's one mono room while the rest of the drums were done in a basement. So you can easily get this drum sound more. It's more about the engineering and getting stuff recorded properly than it is about the room you're doing it in. I think I talked about that yesterday too. That's way more palatable drum room reverb wise than, you know, anything I would get at, or just as palatable as anything I would get at a major studio, like a big studio.